No, I mean, no, but I think people are more interested when you're actually just relevant. When you're talking, you're
Brian,
kind of
is
tailoring.
that sleep one still open?
Should be.
Okay, we can just let them know.
I'm just going to refresh the page just to make sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So we are going to kick off our afternoon session with some words from Dr. Pearl. And also, I just wanted to let everybody know I didn't announce the open-ended sleep symptoms question on the poll, so that is open right now for the next few minutes until we start the next session. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. Okay, if we could turn on the slides. I'm armed with the remote, but I don't see them. So this is going to be, this is the introduction to the afternoon session. I think it's been a wonderful conference. What a great way to bring together the investigators, the clinicians. This is going fast. I haven't actually done anything. Okay, thank you. You advanced it for me. Thank you. So here I was just saying we've brought together the families, the patients, clinicians, investigators. I understand that Dr. Billy Dunn, is on remotely, and he is, well, I can't tell you I have his exact title, but he's definitely chief, as far as I know, of neurotherapeutics at the FDA here in Rockville, in the suburban Washington area, and I've had meetings with him before. We had a meeting some years ago with Alice and Carolyn, the SSADHD advocacy group, and he's very attuned to the family's concerns and the family's perceptions of what the problems are, as opposed to just weak investigators coming up with biomarkers that we can measure and tell us a lot of information, especially in a metabolic disease like this, but don't necessarily tell us how it feels for a patient and for a family. And that's why we're so keen on this meeting, which has been handled so well, of the families, you all coming up and telling us what you're experiencing in the various areas, whether it was seizures, cognitive impairment, psychological impairment, sleep issues. So this is part 2 of my introduction, and this was meant to be a little bit of a show and tell. I don't seem to be able to turn on the video. Can you use your mouse? And on the left-hand side, it's a video. This is Henry's mouse model. Dr. Henry Lee back there with Dr. Alex Rotenberg. Stand up, guys, because this is the future. Yes. And look at that little mouse. I'm showing you how effective the mouse model is. That little mouse is twitching and moving around like that, that's seizing. That little mouse has SSADH deficiency and is seizing, whereas the bigger mouse is able to traverse the cage and climb up the wall and have normal mouse behavior. But the little mouse has failure to thrive, and that, like Dr. Gibson's mouse, failure to thrive in seizures. This mouse model is really specialized. As Dr. Gibson said, it's like knitting with a very fine needle, as opposed to just kind of a gunshot approach to knocking out a gene. This is looking at very specifically ways of introducing a gene that you could turn on and turn off at various times of development and do it a different number of times, and even insert the gene in specific cell lines, not just the entire body or the entire brain at once. So a very specialized approach to gene therapy. And I also want to mention with GC Pharma here, the incredible work being done in enzyme replacement therapy, because it makes so much sense to replace the missing enzyme as long as we can get it where it needs to go and improve the kinds of parameters that we all are discussing today. So let's look at some clinical slides. That's a big thank you to the families for joining, and I'm hoping that the next slides show up. Maybe I go backwards. Can we put the slides back on? Everything went black. It went dark. I don't know if we lost the battery. Okay. Here's one. Let me just go back further. All right, turn on this video. This is a published video of an Italian family of 2 affected brothers with SSADH deficiency. And remember when I described the hemibilismus, or the lurching gait? This was the first case I came across of a teenager with SSADH deficiency having that lurching movement, making gait dysfunctional, that tends to occur at the onset of gait. And then his mother is helping him, and she finally helps him to get him to sit down. And you'll notice he sits down next to his younger brother, who also is affected with SSADH deficiency. So notice the behaviors in both brothers now. You see those hand movements, those developmental stereotypies. You can see why the patients are diagnosed as having autism, because that's so common in autism. Now, this is the same patient. Can you turn it on? Because I don't seem to be able to turn on the video from. To turn on the video? Click. Yep. This is the patient 6 months later. He was treated with vigabatrin, and it was felt that the vigabatrin helped the movement disorder. I'm not so sure, because they didn't really have any follow-up after this. And we're seeing that it fluctuates. He's doing better now, but some of the patients who are developing this, it kind of comes and goes. So we don't really know if the intervention made a difference. And then if we do the next slide, I'm trying to forward this. Now let's watch this gait, because this is Sam. Can you turn on the video for me? I didn't appreciate it in that. I thought he had it in that video.
Yeah, but you can see he was kind of dragging his leg, and even if you look at his hands were all...
Maybe run that one more time. Can you run that video again? His hands are a bit dystonic, stiffened, and the gait's not quite smooth. And now he is doing better on acetazolamide, you said, which is Diamox, which is used for some movement disorders known as basically acute intermittent ataxia, which is related to a calcium gene and not SSADH, but still. Okay, let's see what else we have. Now, what about in infancy? Some of the children I mentioned earlier, I think, may come in with an infection and develop a really severe movement disorder, chorioathetosis. Can you guys see if these videos are working? Yeah. And you see the constant involuntary, it's described as a dance-like movement or an undulating movement when awake. When asleep, movement disorders like these go away. But we've seen this in several infants with SSADH, especially after becoming sick. Now, there's another GABA metabolic disorder, GABA transaminase deficiency. I mentioned GABA transaminase earlier this morning, and I said how vigabatrin inhibits that enzyme. Some children are born with lack of that enzyme. They present with this severe constant chorioathetosis as their primary manifestation. And it's really a much more severe disease than SSADH deficiency, because they had the movement disorder all day long. They never develop cognitively. The epilepsy tends to be severe from either the neonatal or the infantile period, and most patients die before the age of 3. But in following these children, now we're seeing some of the patients are surviving into even adolescence. And we just recently discovered 2 patients in India in their 20s who have it. So as we learn about genes, and we always learn about the worst cases first, and then the phenotypes broaden as we find out about more people who have gene sequencing and turn out to have sometimes the same disorder. Oh, here's a patient with the GABA transaminase deficiency. Let's run this slide. Run this video. In this, he is, I think, 20 months of age, not quite 2.
Silas?
Come on, Sarge.
Silas is 21 months old, and he has intermittent twitching movements and pretty active, irregular involuntary movements. Just clap your hands, Dad, see if he reacts to that.
We actually published him in neurology, and he seemed to do better with a trial of something called, was it flumazenil? I think it was flumazenil. Anyway, it binds to the benzodiazepine receptor on the GABA-A receptor. And we thought it might work, and it seemed to work, but I don't think he's done that great. Let's see what else we have. That may be my last slide, but this is to show maybe pictures a lot of you will recognize because these represent the visits to Boston Children's Hospital for our current natural history study. So just different scenes of our teams, from the clinic space with me to the Meg Lab where Dr. Papadelis is, to families, and I hope Melissa's in some of these because she's done a lot of work, and you'll meet her later this afternoon. And thank you for participating in the study. Thank you to JB for helping so much with it and for the application for the extension, because this data is going to be crucial in providing the information we need to show to the FDA and the NIH that we have the data to really do an intervention trial, because that's our goal, is to use the enzyme replacement therapy, gene therapy as intervention. But we have to know the natural history of a disease before we really know how to measure an intervention. And those are my introductory comments for the afternoon, and now we can move forward with the agenda. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we are going to get started with our next session. In this session, we are going to be talking about speech impairment. So first, I would like to invite Courtney and Alice to come up here and share a little bit about their experiences. Hi, Jack. So whenever you're ready, go ahead. Okay, you're ready to start.
Hi, my name is Jack. I am 11 years old. I use both my iPad and sign language to communicate. It is always good to start with a joke. How does a scientist freshen her breath? With experiments.
Hi, my name is Alice McConnell. I am Jack and Evie's mom. Thank you so much for letting us be here today to be a part of this and share our SSADHD story about speech. Jack was diagnosed at 4 months old after his older sister Evie had been through a long diagnostic odyssey. Jack started right away in occupational speech and physical therapy, along with music and equine therapy. No. Jack had therapy both privately and through early intervention, and he also attended a highly rigorous specialized preschool. He had therapy 5 days a week for several hours a day. By 3 years old, Jack still wasn't speaking. Even with all the supports and rigorous therapies, he wasn't making progress in his verbal communication. I found a sign language program through our School for the Deaf, for the State School for the Deaf, that they have to help deaf families better communicate with their children. We applied to the school, but they had never had a family apply for a child who was basically mute, and said they didn't know how to fit us in. They went through everybody, and finally an intern agreed to work with us, so I started learning sign language. I started teaching Jack sign language, and he loved it, and so he started off with more, and then he progressed to more milk, and then he progressed to more chocolate milk, and then he progressed to, you want to sign with me? I want more chocolate. No, he says he's all done. I want more chocolate milk, slightly warmed, please. So Jack finally had words. It turned out that he was pretty particular, too. No, sir. No, sir. Yeah, he said sorry. Once his signing was underway, we introduced Proloquo on his iPad to give him even more vocabulary. The iPad is much more granular, and it lets him speak with people that don't understand sign language. At 5 years old, Jack entered kindergarten. From the very first day in kindergarten, we could tell that he wasn't very welcome. Our home school had never had a nonverbal child attend school there, and they weren't open to making modifications or accommodations to support him. Out of 800 children in the school, he was the only nonverbal student. Jack, no, don't do that. Jack's primary language at this point was signed exact English. We requested a translator be present for him throughout the school day and at all after-school events. Our request was denied because those services were only provided to children that were deaf. Tomorrow. So at the middle of his kindergarten year, the school came to us in our ARD committee meeting and said they wanted to move Jack across the district to a school where he had no community, knew nobody. He would be in a segregated classroom with all nonverbal children. We disagreed with this, and so the burden fell to us to try to keep Jack at his home school. From there, we had to go through over a year and a half of legal proceedings to get Jack a proper placement. We had to go all the way through. The Department of Justice and the federal government became involved before we were able to get the correct services for Jack. Jack has been at the School for the Deaf for over 4 years now, and he's progressed greatly. He has teachers who sign, other students that sign, the administrator sign, the janitor signs, everybody in the school signs. Jack has friends at the school. One nice part is deafness comes with a lot of comorbidities, and so there's a lot of special needs children at the school, so the school just understands them. Another big part of it is as we move into middle school, we are not going to have sign language support again. So Jack's actually going to repeat 5th grade at the school. Not that he's not ready for middle school. I just need another year to prepare myself before we can do the fight again to get him proper services in middle school. Another part of his communication on his iPad, it's so fragile. At the end of May this school year, they were updating his iPad, and they erased the entire iPad since kindergarten. So I equate it to somebody that's had a brain injury and lost all of their language. Jack had his discussions that he had with his grandparents, funny little phrases, all of these things. His grandparents have passed, so we're never going to be able to rebuild that part of it. And so it was a huge loss to our family. Another part is that safety is a major concern with speech. If Jack is ever lost or hurt and the person doesn't know how to sign, or Jack doesn't have his iPad, how is he going to communicate with that? So far, the lack of speech has driven his entire elementary school career, and it's just been a huge determiner in his life. I do have to say he verbally stims quite a bit, and it causes a lot of social issues where children outside of the School for the Deaf don't ask him to play or want to be with him. He gets a lot of strange looks. I got pictures sent back to me from one of the camps with gen ed children, and Jack was off to the side and all of the other kids were together because I know it's Jack's stimming that's keeping him from being able to participate with them. One of the blessings of the School for the Deaf is all of his classmates are deaf, and so they don't hear his stimming, and so he's able to function there just fine. Jack is such a great guy. He doesn't get frustrated when you don't understand him. He's patient and will work with you for over half an hour until you can finally figure out what he's trying to say. He'll give you a thumbs up and a high five and sign good job when you finally get it. He's been a great teacher, and I'm so proud of him and all of his hard work. Thank you so much for letting us speak today.
Thank you, Alice. My name is Courtney, and this is Minor. Minor speaks, he's 6. He speaks with a lamp device, but he said he was too shy to do that today, so he just wanted to say hi. Do you want to say hi? He's got the Southeast Texas hat down. So before he was a year old, can you all hear me? Before he was a year old, he began to get frustrated that he could not communicate easily. There were months that went by where he would just bite. If he was hungry, bite. Thirsty, bite. Wanting to play, bite. We lovingly called him our little piranha. Although it sounds a little funny, it was a really terribly hard time for us. We were trying everything, teaching him sign language, showing him baby sign language videos, speech therapy, both private and that given by the state through early intervention, videos made by speech pathologists that were supposed to promote speech, reading book after book to him. I bought every kind of toy that was listed by speech pathologists to promote speech and language. No light-up toys, no sound toys, open-ended toys only, nothing overstimulating. You name it, we had it all. I would spend hours and hours each night researching how to help him. Then one day, his little hypotonic hands were able to sign more and eat, and the biting stopped. But the struggle continued for us to help him find his voice. I carefully crafted a binder with photos of all of his food items, each of his toys, things he played with outside, and each of his family members, so that he could have a makeshift communication system to ease his frustration. We went through 8 to 10 speech therapists before the age of 3. We heard things from speech pathologists like, I've never seen a child like him before who knows everything but cannot speak. I just don't know what to do with him. I can't get anything out of him. I quit my job as an attorney so that I could focus on minor. We enrolled him in the local university's graduate student speech and language program twice a week, in addition to speech at our local school district and a private therapist. He had so much to say, but at the age of 3.5, the only sound that he could make with his mouth was "buh." We had literally exhausted all resources in our area. Then we found an amazing school in Houston that specializes in children that have speech and language disorders, but it was 2 hours away from our home. We took him for an evaluation anyway, and he was accepted, and we enrolled him. My husband and I lived separately during the week, only seeing each other on the weekends and shuffling our now 10-year-old daughter, now 7 at the time, back and forth between Houston and home. We pulled her out of her little private school and enrolled her in a school in Houston, then eventually decided to homeschool her just to make everything work. In the last few months, we've decided to completely relocate our family, sell our house, and move halfway between home, where my husband and I grew up and graduated, where our families still are, and Houston. We pay the equivalent of a college tuition for him to go to his school. That's where he receives his therapy, and our entire family, including our extended family, has had to make sacrifices to make it happen. Minor still struggles with extreme, severe apraxia of speech. I don't like to use the term nonverbal because he's very, very verbal. His apraxia kind of sounds like if you were to hold your tongue and talk. But then also some words come out backwards, and some other words only come out just the consonant sound. For example, right before I sat down to write what I was going to say today, Minor came running to me, and he said, "Mama, all done. Mama, all done." And I didn't know what he was saying. I said, "Minor, you spilled something?" I was on the phone. He said, "No, Mama, all done." Then I began to get frustrated. I'm on the phone. He's trying to communicate with me. We were back and forth, back and forth. Do you remember? Yeah. And so I was talking on the phone. I got off the phone, and it hit me. The clothes were in the washer. I was trying to pack for this trip, and he was saying, "The clothes are all done." He was being kind and helpful, and I said, "Minor, I'm so sorry." And he said, "Ha-ha, Mama," which in Minor speaks means, "Silly Mama." And then I apologized and told him thank you for helping. But this type of exchanges are normal. We have to repeat back to him what we hear him saying, and then he tells us yes or no if that's what he's saying. There was once when we were at a store, and he was trying to help. And he was putting things on the conveyor belt, and he kept telling me no and pointing to the end. He was communicating that there was no room on the conveyor belt at the beginning, and he was going to wait for room on the end. But the person working the cash register heard this exchange and told him to quit being a little brat. It was heartbreaking. Another time, he told a different cashier thank you for handing him the receipt, but his thank you went from sign to kind of like blowing a kiss. So his thank you kind of looks like this. And he was made fun of by a grown adult in the middle of a store. Minor uses a speech device now, but things like participating in class discussions and making friends are excruciatingly hard for him because of his language difficulties, and it can be very isolating. It's really hard to take a speech device to play soccer, which he likes to play, to do taekwondo, and to play on the playground. It causes a lot of anxiety for us as parents because he can't effectively communicate with unfamiliar listeners. What if we were to get in a car accident and we were unconscious and he was trying to tell the police officers his name? Or what if they offered him a snack and he couldn't effectively communicate with them when he told them that he was allergic to egg and dairy? This year at school, he was excluded by a specific teacher due to his food allergies and speech problems, and he couldn't effectively communicate what happened, only that it made him sad. He didn't have the words to come home and tell us the day that he was given M&Ms and had an anaphylactic attack at school, and so we weren't sure what had definitely happened. We called 911, but we couldn't get a straight story. He also couldn't come home and tell us that he was being given old candy corn for birthday treats when the other students were having cupcakes. He could just tell us that, and this sadness and mistreatment went on for months unnoticed. We had great difficulty at security in 2 different airports in the last year because he couldn't articulate his name to where they could understand him. And now my daughter, every time we go to the airport, she says, "Mom, what if we can't get on the plane?" And then she assures him that she'll help him because they look to her. I guess they think we maybe have stolen him. I'm not sure what happens, but they ask her. But this is just a snapshot of our journey with Minor and his struggles with SSADH as it pertains to speech. And our family is so grateful for this opportunity to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Okay, so we thank you so much to our speakers for kicking off the first part of this conversation. As we get the slides up, I'm going to reshare the sort of ground rules again. Please, again, come up here and share your experience. Please keep your responses brief, a minute or less. Please keep your responses focused on the topic at hand, and please keep your responses primarily patient-focused. So when we're talking about speech, do you guys mind getting the dip? That's it. So that's what I just shared. This is, again, to remind you of where to go in case you logged out. So I'll give you guys a second to go back into your phone. And just to add to our discussion on speech impairment before we start the polling, I know that Courtney had mentioned apraxia of speech, and this is really talking about the desire and the capacity to speak, but being unable to coordinate the necessary speech sound movements. Other speech impairments include aphasia, which is the loss of ability to express speech and linguistic skills, and that has an impact on reading, writing, and comprehension. Dysarthria, which is difficulty speaking due to an inability to control muscles used for speech. And all of these can bring about, different sort of impacts, just like the vocal stimming that Alice was alluding to, which may include groaning, grunting, shrieking, just to, again, not meant to be a comprehensive discussion, introduction to speech impairment, just to get you guys thinking. So with that, we will start our first afternoon poll. And this is what are the greatest impacts of speech impairment in SSADH deficiency patients. And again, you have the ability to select 3. As we're getting these results in, I'd like to encourage you to share your unique story. Come on up here, this is all extremely important to inform our Voice of the Patient report, which I'll talk about later on this afternoon. So 5 more seconds. And we'll stop there. And here we see the primary impact being on social interactions, as well as safety concerns and independent activities. And I would love to invite our first audience speaker to speak.
Okay, we have my other son, Thomas. Do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Thomas.
You have to
Hi,
reach the
Thomas.
microphone.
I'm Thomas,
Do you want to say how old you are?
19.
So what about speech? How long have you had, do you have some speech therapy?
Yes.
How long have you had speech therapy? A long time, a short time?
Medium.
Medium, okay. And what do you do in speech? What did Miss Amon do with you?
Help articulate sounds, words.
And do you have like a group at lunch?
Yes.
What do you do in that group?
Talk, use goals from speech.
Good. Anything else you want to say about what you do in speech?
Mm-mm.
Okay, good job.
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas, for sharing that. Can we have any other? Come on up. Do you want to pull the microphone down so that you can? There you go. Look at you, muscles. Go ahead. Tell us your name.
My name is Maddie Jane. I'm 10 years old, and I'm Miner's big sister. Talking is hard for him, but I can understand him best. I interpret what he is saying for my parents and family and friends. It is hard for other kids to play with him because they can't understand him. I worry that he'll be made fun of or left out. He understands and hears everything and just wants to do all the normal things like me.
Thank you so much, Maddie. And Miner's very lucky to have a big sister like you. Thank you so much for sharing. Let's hear some other impacts. We've talked about social interactions. Does anybody want to talk about safety concerns because of the inability to express, threats to safety, or anything else regarding speech impairment? Come on up.
About the speech, George, it's the most major impact he has. I think that everything begins from the speech. George, we have made several tries to make him speak. He doesn't want to write and read, but he understands what we say, and the word that he's using, it's about 5 words. He has a telegraph language, which has helped him a lot about his brother and his sister, and probably he tried to repeat what they say, so it's a really help for him to see what is going on. The problem is that because he can't talk, we don't know how he feels sometimes, if he's in pain, if he hurts, if someone in the school hit him, we don't know. So sometimes he comes and we don't know what is wrong. So we call the school to say if everything was okay. Or somewhere we go out with the other kids for a walk, and he starts talking, and the other kids listen to him and say what he's saying because they don't understand him. I understand him, but someone else can understand him because a word, let's say mom, he will say Bibi. What's Bibi? Nobody knows. I know that he calls mom Bibi, but after a while he will learn. The problem is that he takes the information inside him, but he can't express it. He can't repeat it. Something blocks him. And this is a problem. This is a problem for the sleeps. This is a problem for the behaviors. Everything starts, I think, from the speech. We have tried different methods, also horse riding, to speak in horse riding, also with the pool, with the swimming. The logotherapist trying different methods. but it goes slowly, step by step. Every little while, one more word. It's about 70, 80 words now he uses in simple sentences, but we have to work more on that, and we don't know what else to do.
And do you find that George gets frustrated when...
Yes, a lot.
Okay, with
Yes,
when other
because-
people can't understand him?
Yes, because he wants to say something, but he can. And it's very bad for him. He wants to say thank you here, but he can be here. He can travel.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate it. Is there anybody else that wants to share their experience with speech impairment? And I invite, come on up.
Yeah, my name is Azim. I want to share about the speech that I have all the 3 kids out of 3. 19-year-old Sahar is completely nonverbal. She does not speak. Maybe her vocabulary is 1 or 2 words only. And Daim speaks, but a little bit, and Kiran is pretty much speaks okay. So they cannot speak, they cannot express their expressions, so that's frustrated them. And as a parent, we some of the things we understand their frustration, and when they want to say something, we understand, but not everybody. It's hard for us to traveling. When we were traveling at the airport, that one time, like at Doha, Qatar, Daim disappeared. Okay, so all of a sudden he just disappeared, and we knew he cannot tell anybody who is he, whose parents, and we're looking everywhere. He went on escalator in different floor, and so security and everybody was looking. They locked down the airport. They were very helpful right there, and then we find him maybe in half an hour later or 30 minutes later. So these are the safety concerns, because they cannot tell their, even though they tell their name, but nobody can understand what they're saying. So we're having that concern. We go to the amusement park anywhere. Me and my wife, all we do is just we are around them, keeping them together so they don't lost somewhere, and making sure they are getting their rights, either me with the kids and other kids. So we just go and watch them. We just so this is our entertainment, and we go to the amusement parks right there. Because I have 3, so I don't remember since the last time when we went there and we did a ride. We are all with them, and they are doing the ride, because we have to make sure they are safe and they are enjoying, and they love doing the rides there. Thank you.
So it sounds like it has an impact on you leaving the house and doing things outside the home.
Right.
Is that what I'm
exactly.
understanding?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate that. Is there anybody else that wants to share? Okay. Well, I think we can close out this section. So I'm going to, if there's anything that you want to share on speech impairments, then we will open up our open-ended discussion. And we'll keep that open for just a minute here as we transition over into the next section. And I believe we are going to be asking Derek and Kate to come join us and talk to us a little bit about the physical limitations associated with SSADH deficiency. Thank you.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Derek Irvin. My wife Kathleen and I live in Western Massachusetts, and we are blessed to be the parents of Anna. She's 11 years old. She was diagnosed with SSADH at 9 months, and Before I tell you about what she's limited in doing physically, I want to first share with you what she can do. She runs, she dances, she is very active, but this is only after many, many, many years and many hours of therapies and dedicated therapists and doctors. And so just want to share a little bit about our journey with SSADH and with Anna. So as most of our kids and our experience is that low muscle tone, hypotonia, leads to a lot of physical limitations. This was the same for Anna. She, as a very young girl, was super hypotonic and could barely do much of anything, crawl, all of it. And so this led to shallow hip sockets. Her ligaments in her knees and ankles didn't develop properly. And so she began walking at about 6 years old, again, after many hours of physical therapy and occupational therapy and such. But we went through the gait trainers, knee braces, leg braces, ankle orthotics, and she's graduated out of all of those and now just has little inserts into her shoes because her feet still kind of curl to the, on the inside, and which obviously makes it difficult for her to keep her balance. Again, she does walk, she runs, she dances, but she loses her balance easily, trips and falls. She has trouble with uneven surfaces. If it's a nice level floor, she's fine. But the moment she steps outside even into the grass sometimes, can be a little tricky for her. She cannot carry heavy things. She is super helpful and always wants to help out. But when she's trying to help mom or dad carry the groceries in, she can't carry more than a can of something, and not because she doesn't have the physical strength to do it, but because of the lack of balance. So as soon as she lifts something on one side, down she goes. And so that's a limitation. She cannot climb in and out of a car and into her car seat. And so that is, as she gets bigger, that is, obviously we have to lift her in and out of the car. She can walk up to the car, and once she's in the car, she's fine, but it's that step into the car and then up into the car seat. So she fine motor skills. So with the car seat, she can't buckle herself in or unbuckle herself, which I guess is a blessing in disguise. But she cannot fully dress herself. We can start her, and sometimes she can get her arm through a hole, but most of the time she needs help. Obviously, this leads also into toilet training. She is fully potty trained at this point. She can tell us when she has to go and even get into the bathroom herself, but getting on and off the toilet and balancing on the toilet and all of that also is where she's limited. As far as playing and climbing on playgrounds, again, if it's something very basic she can do, but anything with ladders or something where it needs a whole lot of physical strength and balance, she can't, which then limits her socially with friends, and and like we've said, this is all connected. So speech, behavior. As soon as somebody sees there's something different, they say, "Oh, she's different," and then there goes the new friend, that we made. And so there's some social aspects to it as well. And then as far as this, we don't know, and I'd love to talk with some of you later, see if this has been some of your experience. Because of the severe hypotonia, she developed scoliosis, and so that has also limited her physically. We were at one point at a 40-degree curve when it was first diagnosed, but through, again, many hours of therapy and different modalities of therapies and all that, we've actually been able to reduce her curve down below 20 degrees, which has helped her, again, with her mobility and things like that. But again, we see it's the hypotonia that leads to all these issues physically. So again, grateful to be here, grateful to share our story with you, and just so thankful to everyone that's made this happen. So thank you.
Thank you, Derek.
Whenever you're ready. My name's Kate Abellio. As I've said before, we have 2 daughters with SSADH. Maggie is 19 and Lizzie is 7, and they are about as different as 2 siblings can be. They both do pretty well with gross motor skills, but they've got a lot of challenges with fine motor skills. So Maggie was diagnosed at age 3. She kind of was slow in developmental delay. She walked at 14 months, so on the late side of normal, but not, no red flags. She started running right away. She jumped. She liked to climb when she was little. She's clumsy. She falls a lot of bruises. One of her teachers in kindergarten actually said to me, "It's a good thing we know Maggie well, or we'd be calling Child Protective Services." And it's kind of funny, but it's also really scary. Yeah. Lizzie was very different. She was diagnosed at 6 months, and her presentation was a lot like those babies that Dr. Pearl showed a short time ago. She got the flu. She lost all her muscle tone. She started with twitching, and she didn't stop for a couple of years. It was years of intense physical therapy till she could stand, till she could walk. She is like Maggie. She walks, she runs now, she can jump. That didn't happen until she was about 5 or 6. She loves to go to the playground. She loves to climb on all the apparatus, but it's kind of dangerous, so I don't let her go above my head. But she falls frequently. She's got bruises all over, but fortunately the school knows about this, so it's okay. So they both function gross motor skills well, but it limits us as a family. We were hiking in Acadia National Park last week, and the path became very rocky, and our 2 neurotypical children went on, and we had to stop and just wait for them to come back because they can't do that. We like to kayak, but we stay on flat water and don't give them a paddle because best case scenario, it'll be float away. Worst case scenario, you're all going in the water. In the grand scheme of life, these are small things, but they're a significant impact and limitations on our family. But then there's the fine motor skills. And they both have pretty significant limitations that impact everyday life. Dressing is very difficult. Maggie needs a lot of help getting things over her head. She cannot put a bra on by herself. Sports bras, she can't pull them over. Don't forget about fastening a bra. That's never going to happen. Neither one can write. Maggie can scrawl her name with 5 or 6 G's in there, but it's all across the page. Lizzie scribbles up and down. She can't even do circles yet at 7. And I don't think writing is going to happen for either of them. They can use the iPad. I guess all kids can with some precision, but they still need a lot of help. There's no typing. If you wanted to put in what you want to watch, what video, they can't do that. But if you put on Disney Princesses, Maggie can make it to Beauty and the Beast and watch what she wants. In terms of dressing, no buttons, no snaps, no zippers. Maybe you can get your coat on, but there's no way they're going to zip it up. We haven't done a whole lot yet with trying to make food. Feeding themselves is a very messy process. Cereal's everywhere, it's on the floor. Maggie persists in eating her soup with a fork, so that's pretty messy. And we've done some trying to cook together, trying to make a sandwich, and the knife just tears through the bread, and there's just long term, I don't see them being very independent because the fine motor skills just aren't there to do it. This is sort of out of time, but I do want to go back to some of the speech stuff very quickly, because one of the things that we deal with as a family is the constant background noise, this constant humming that the girls do, and the constant, the vocalizations. And I realize that in our household, the fact that there's this constant background noise makes me on edge, and I get very irritable, and then I'm snapping at the kids. And it's one of those small things that really has a big impact on our family. And the other thing is that we can't go out to see musicals, to theaters, because Maggie's dancing in her chair when the music's playing and, disrupting everybody around her, making a lot of noise. And we go anyway sometimes, and sometimes regret it, but these are all things that impact our lives.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kate. So we've had some pretty significant impacts that have been discussed here with respect to the physical limitations. So I'm just going to go ahead and talk a little bit about some details regarding the physical limitations, and then we will get started into our polling session. And okay, so just this is a lot of this is sort of reiterating what some of what our panelists have said, but talking about gross motor impairment, we're talking about large muscles, big movements, such as walking, crawling, rolling over, throwing, lifting, and kicking. Fine motor impairment involves these smaller muscles and is really referring to these precise, more coordinated movements, such as typing, holding a pencil, drawing, doing buttons, using scissors. Movement disorders, including ataxia, which is sort of balance issues due to poor muscle control, choreathetosis, and I know that Dr. Pearl had referred to this as well, and this is where the chorea, which is the involuntary migrating contractions, as well as the twisting and the writhing, which is the athetosis part. Dyskinesia, I know we've talked about as well, in addition to hypotonia, which is the low muscle tone. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start the polling about what are the biggest impacts of the physical limitations. And I've listed some there. We've talked about some here, but there's obviously more. And if you guys want to take a minute to participate in that poll. Okay, so let's give it another few seconds. And then I think the conversation here has been going great, guys. You have, please, and now I've locked out the poll, please continue to provide these specifics, because that's really where we're going to get an information on the on the real aspects and the impacts of these symptoms. So, I know that we've talked generally about independent activities. Do we want to talk a little bit about specifically eating and drinking difficulties? So that's something that we might want to throw on, but I will let our speakers go ahead.
Okay. I don't eat. I was tube fed for many years. I now only drink Boost. I cannot chew really at all. I don't have the ability. I worry about aspirating, so no go. Anything else you want to say? Because this is the physical limitations. A few more issues just for me. Scoliosis, yes. Spinal fusion, yes. No walking, yes. No talking, yes. So, heart issues, yes. Really all muscles, too lax, so issues.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate it. Let's hear from some other family members about the physical limitations and how they impact SSADH patients and families.
Hello again. George was diagnosed from SSADH in the age of 1.5. After our doctor said he was 6 months that he couldn't stand up his head, so we had to search what was going wrong. And 1.5 years, we made some blood and urine tests, and they called us to the doctor and told us that he had SSADH. It was the first child in Greece, so the doctor was looking at us and he couldn't tell us nothing. He didn't know nothing. So we started our race to see what we could do. I want to thank Caroline for giving us a hope, to tell us what to expect, what to see, how to go to make our life better, because nobody could help us in Greece. Nobody could tell us something. Only Caroline was our, I don't know how to say it. It's everything for us. It was everything for us. Everything we needed, we just mailed to Caroline and give us a hope. George, now he works in life skills. He drinks only with a straw. He can use it drinking with a glass. He can use his lips. He drinks with a straw. He uses fork and spoon. He almost eats alone. And about the dressing, he tries to put his shorts and his t-shirt alone, but he doesn't know the right side, which one is the right side. So he looked at us and he told us, now what? So we help him. Sometimes maybe he's trying to put the shorts in his head, so he's laughing. He knows that he's doing wrong, and we take it and he puts it on the right side. In the toilet, he goes alone, and he's trying to make better his life skills every day. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Alice. I'm Evie and Jack's mom. Fine motor skills have been a huge problem for us, especially for Evelyn as she's becoming a young lady. She's 13 years old. She wants to wear certain clothes and have her hair a certain way, but her clothing options are very limited to what you would put a toddler in. And so everything has to be elastic. She's not able to dress herself. It causes a lot of problems at lunchtime at school because she's so messy when she eats. Nobody else wants to sit around her. She's still very rudimentary. She can't open packages. She feeds herself only with a spoon, cannot use a knife. Toileting is still an issue, and as she enters puberty, I just know it'll become more complex as her cycle starts, and how is she going to keep herself clean, keep her clothes clean, all of those parts of it, and then moving on to any vocational skills or independent living, she'll be very, very limited, giving her fine motor skills.
Thank you very much, Alice. Let's talk a little bit about, I heard getting dressed from a lot of people. Let's hear from anybody that wants to talk about the sort of challenges of our patients dressing themselves or even getting help. So I invite anybody to come up here and share a little bit. Go ahead.
So my son Jaden, he's 13, and he still is not able to dress himself. He can't bathe himself. I have to do all of that for him. He's not able to brush his teeth, and even when I do it for him, it's like a sensory issue in his mouth that he won't open his mouth or resists and doesn't want me to be in his mouth brushing his teeth. Another thing I wanted to touch on with the eating difficulties is that he will, it's almost like he forgets to chew his food, and a lot of times what's happened is he's choked because he overstuffs his mouth or he doesn't chew. And even at 13 years old, I have to cut his food up very small just out of concern. I attend a yearly CPR class just to be, prepared in case something happens because I'm fearful of that. And it's just really hard. It's really hard that he's not able to do all these daily activities or things on his own, and I have to do them for him. So
yeah, it definitely seems to have an impact on independent life. Mm-hmm. Now, when you say that he cannot dress himself, is it buttons or is it just overall?
It's just anything. So even just like putting his shirt on, or pulling his pants, taking his clothes off or pulling his pants down isn't really an issue for him, but it's putting things on. So taking things off isn't a problem, but putting things on is. So.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing, and especially with respect to the safety concerns. I see that 15% of our participants. Keith, how are we doing on Zoom?
We just have the first one. Actually, it's Tamara. So
Okay.
ask her to unmute.
Is that Tamara?
Yeah, Tamara.
Tamara, are you there?
Yeah, it's
Tomorrow's hi.
Husband, Rob. Can you
Hi,
hear me?
Rob.
Hi. Yeah, so our son, zippers don't happen. Button, he's 12, Boston. Buttons don't happen, so we get elastic. Pants, shoelaces don't happen, so we have Velcro. He falls pretty frequently. Someone mentioned brushing their teeth. We have to monitor that. He'll put his toothbrush in his mouth, and then he chews on it, and he jumps around and gets distracted very easily. Writing is very difficult, almost like a 5-year-old's writing, I guess, and he's 12. His gait is very wobbly, which makes navigating difficult sometimes. He can run, he can walk, he can climb, but I'm right next to him when he does climb, just to make sure that he's not falling. Is there anything I'm missing, Mara? I think that's the majority of it. Yeah, fine motor skills are very difficult for him, and so that's and then multitasking, right, is difficult. Right. And so being able to be focused on one thing at a time is helpful. Thank you for letting us share.
Thank you, Rob. I really appreciate it. And we have a little bit more time. So I want to explore this for a second, because 15% of you have said that the physical limitations have an impact on overall social interactions. So can somebody speak to that a little bit and talk a little bit about how the physical limitations affect social interactions? Thank you.
We spend a lot of time in medical interventions, and it is both because of acute issues, you heard some of them, but also the therapy. So our kids are very geared towards dealing with adults, but not their peers, and frankly, our time. 80% of our time is spent in some sort of medical or therapy intervention, which really leaves very little time for fun or for social activities. And I think that that's a really difficult piece. And you have sort of the reverberating effects we heard from Sam. You don't like shots. They don't like to have those interactions. And it's not like you can take them to a medical intervention and, the switch is on and then it's off again. It often, has some repercussions. So I think that's part of the reason why it has a social interaction effect.
That's really interesting. Thank you so much for clarifying that. So it sounds like the therapy itself has an impact on being able to interact with their peers. Does anybody want to comment some more on the impact on social? Hi, come on up. And do you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, I'm Jeff. My son is Zach. He's sitting in the back of the room there. He probably doesn't like me talking about him, but he is very gross motor, is very good. He can ride a bike, he can run, he can climb, things like that. It's fine motor that he really has issues with, writing. He can talk, probably talks too much. Most people don't understand him, so we have to do a lot of translating. And I think, from the social aspect, that is very difficult because a lot of people don't understand him and can't have a conversation. He's very one-sided. He wants everybody to know what he's got to say versus listening to them and having a back and forth, which I realize isn't physical, but it does kind of lead into that social interaction. From getting dressed, he's fine at getting dressed. If you're okay with him having his shirt on backwards or his pants on backwards, or he's been nicknamed the plumber when he bends over and stuff sometimes. But he'll put his shoes on the wrong feet, and it's kind of strange. He doesn't like long sleeve shirts, and he doesn't like shorts. So it's physically, those kind of certain things bug him, but yet he can walk around all day with the shoes on the wrong feet, and that doesn't bother him at all. That's kind of Zach.
Thank you for sharing. It sounds like all of that tends to take up a lot of time, and that's another sort of impact that that we've been noticing here. Come on up.
I hope I'm not gonna cry this time.
That's okay. We got Kleenex here.
You have
Kleenex here, so we got you covered.
No, I was just collecting what I have to say about that. That eating, drinking difficulties are especially for my daughter Kiran. She is 16, as she told that she cannot brush her teeth. I try, but she gag all the time. And the thing is that she don't know how to chew. She just put anything in the mouth. The second thing, it's in there. I mean, she don't know how to chew, even though I just pretend in front of her, do this, but and it's gone. So because of that and not brushing, she has a lot of issues with the mouth and with the teeth, even though we go to dentist and they say she has to go to OT. I mean, they cannot do it. Even children, pediatric, they cannot do that. So, and second thing, they don't know how much they have to eat. Especially for Kiran, I'm sometimes so mad because she say I'm not full. Even though food in front of her, and she just cannot eat that. But she say, no, I'm not full. But she wanna eat, and she's not satisfied. And the other, my son, either don't know something in the mind. If he think this is plate is one time is enough, and sometime he don't know. He just want more and more. So I don't know, they don't feel something because they don't chew or there is any problem or something. But it's really this thing, I think, affecting on the health and everything depend on related with this disease. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing. We have just a couple more minutes. Maybe I'll throw this out there. How has eating and drinking difficulties affected? How do these difficulties affect when people are at school or outside the home? Does anybody want to comment to that? How do you manage those types of difficulties when your patient is away from you? Go ahead.
I'm Carolyn. I'm Sam Hoffman's mom, and as far as eating, he just has no awareness that when he gets done eating, half of the food is on his face. Mm-hmm. So even when he would go to work, he has a break. So I would send like a snack that he could have to eat when he was on break. And hours later, when he would get done working, half of whatever I sent is still on his face. And you're like, Sam, you look ridiculous. Didn't anybody tell you? Or did you see yourself in the mirror? So that it's just little things like that with the fine motor skills and awareness, and it's a huge issue for them. Even like he can make his own peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but then there's jelly everywhere and there's peanut butter everywhere, and so the fine motor skills are really difficult for Sam. So
thank you so much. We have a Zoom?
Yes, Tamara.
Oh, hi Tamara. Or Rob.
Hi, it's Tamara.
Hi Rob.
Hi, real quick, echo exactly what Carolyn said. Absolutely, Boston has food all over his face all of the time and isn't aware of it. I'll also echo what the mom said before. He is never full. So, you know, we have to limit his food intake. Otherwise, you know, he would have other issues. With regard to the physical limitations as it pertains to social interaction, the problem is that he can't keep up with other children, neurotypical children. Okay. And so he starts to get left behind. But I do just want everyone to be cognizant that it's not isolated solely to physical limitations. There's also social interaction issues that it's almost that double whammy, right? Where he can't keep up and then he has a hard time maintaining focus. So we use like the terminology, what's in everyone's thought bubble, not just in your thought bubble. But that makes it very difficult to where he really doesn't have true friends. We have him in a special needs basketball league where he actually did really well, which we were really thrilled and surprised by that. And a lot of the kids have autism in that league, and so they give them latitude to play, and so they're not blocking each other's shots and things of that nature. And that was the first time that we've ever seen our son thrive in an environment and actually have some peer interaction where they're encouraging each other. But really, there's no strong social bonds that most neurotypical people would experience by age 12, where you have a best friend and sleepovers and things of that nature. That doesn't really exist. So I just wanted to provide that feedback. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rob, for providing some clarification on that. And again, I think this really reinforces this idea of these symptoms or these aspects. We're talking about them separately, but they work together to create these overall impacts. So is there anybody else that wants to share on physical limitations? Because we may close that up unless anybody else wants to. Go ahead, Courtney.
Just really quick, I'm Courtney Davis, Miner's mom, but I just, on the eating and drinking, because I haven't heard anybody comment on this, when he was a baby, he had severe eating problems, and it caused, he was actually first diagnosed, they thought he had some type of renal issue because of the dehydration, because he wasn't able to, he was nursing and he couldn't get enough, and he lost the ability to take a bottle, and it was by the grace of God that he wasn't tube fed. I mean, I don't know how that didn't happen. Couldn't chew, and we spent months and months in over a year in feeding therapy. So but it did resolve itself eventually. But I just didn't hear anybody talking about the infancy part of it.
So there was a latch issue, or?
No, it was just more of the bottle issue. I was trying to go back to work so he could nurse, but he could not take a bottle at all.
Okay.
And the doctors had no idea what was going on. It was before he was diagnosed.
Okay, I appreciate you sharing that and adding that to the conversation. Come on up, Kash.
Hi, Amira's dad. I would just like to say that she's always had eating and drinking difficulties. She's actually obsessed with food, and if it was up to her, she would eat all the time. There seems to be a disconnect between the mind and the stomach. There's a complete disconnect between the two. And also, she always had problems chewing. So when she entered into kindergarten, and she was also in mainstream school for a year and a half, she needed a teaching assistant to help her because she wasn't chewing her food. So what would happen was that sometimes, if she was eating something like grapes, it would get stuck in her throat. And also, when she was younger, between 3 and 5, when she used to crawl around the floor, she used to just put everything into her mouth. And there was one time when she swallowed a 2-inch magnet. And luckily, it was the day that I'd actually done a first aid course. And I recognized that there was something, there was an issue. And then this also links in with everything. So the eating and drinking difficulties also link in with the social interactions because they don't know what's appropriate. So where they are invited to a birthday party or whatever, if they're standing next to the person that's cutting the cake, they will just put their hand into the cake. Yeah,
right.
They won't even think. So it leads to the fact that they don't know what's appropriate.
Right.
They don't know what the protocol is. So then this affects them in terms of, people, even when people try to make the effort in the kindergarten years, soon they're kind of almost blacklisted because the child is, if it's too high maintenance to bring them into that social environment. Doesn't matter how empathetic the parents might be. So you might get one invite, but then after that, it's gone.
I really appreciate you sharing that, Kash. Thank you so much. It seems like a lot of people have mentioned that there's a decreased sensation of fullness. Can we get just a raise of hands of do we have decreased sensation of fullness? Did you want to say something? Yeah. Okay. Thank you all for raising your hands.
When Liam was a baby, it would take forever for him to drink. And I remember he was our first, and I said, I feel like when I finish feeding him, it's time to eat again. And everything's relative. Other new moms would say, I know, isn't that the truth? Because to them, it felt like that too. But it was literally, I'd finish feeding him, and then it took that long. And then 20 minutes later, he'd have to eat again because it would take him, hours. And for the longest time, it was because he just wasn't, his sucking was so weak. And eventually, we stopped feeding with the bottle, and we'd have to thicken his milk, pump, and we'd have to thicken his milk. He was so indifferent about food for the longest time, and it was so frustrating because he not only did he not get any joy out of eating anything, he couldn't stand eating. We almost had to put a feeding tube in him. So we had to thicken his liquids because he'd aspirate with like a thickener called Thicket. And that was until we thickened his liquids until age 7. And then he was on fork mashed foods up until age 9. And he will still put unlimited amounts of food in his mouth if we don't pace him. Like, we have to physically block him. And he can't eat anything beyond like what a toddler would eat in terms of it needing to be soft enough. Like, he can't eat steak or anything.
Sure.
Yeah. So and I think that's it. Yeah. Oh, but the good news is that suddenly he started liking food, and now he's got food that he loves. So.
Thank you for sharing. So I'm just going to ask one more time, just because I didn't see everybody. If you have experienced a decreased sensation of fullness, can we just get a raise of hands real quick? I just want to see. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. So we're going to end our physical limitations session. If there's any further comments that you want to make, you can do that now online. So then I'm going to ask you guys to participate in one more poll after this. So we'll give this just a minute or two, and then we are going to take a little bit of a break, and then the last sections that we're going to have are going to be on diagnosis as well as clinical trial participation. So I am going to now we've talked about 6 different aspects of the disease, and we've learned that they're not independent of one another. There's a lot of like overlap there, and they sort of have and together a lot of these different aspects of SSADH deficiency have different impacts on whether it be social interactions, whether it be independent activities or other aspects. What I'd like to finish off doing is, now we've got seizures, we've got speech impairment, we've got physical limitations, we've got sleep disturbances, we've got intellectual disability. There was behavior. Thank you. I'd like you now, and we're going to close this open-ended part out in just a second. And if you need me to open it back up, I will totally do that. But moving to the last symptoms-related question, and where is it? Here we go. So now I want you to talk about what is the most burdensome of these symptoms. Totally understanding that there's a lot of overlap there. But if you were to rank the most burdensome symptoms, which would they be? And we'll spend a little bit here, and let's just take maybe about 20 more seconds for people to participate. And you can, again, just like before, you can select the top 3. Okay. So another 10 seconds, and then we'll stop, and then we will take a break. And let's be done. So it looks like intellectual disabilities is the biggest, followed by behavior and psychological issues, as well as speech impairment. So that's I think that's important to note. So I want to thank you again for participating. You guys have been doing amazing, and we've been getting great feedback. We are going to take a little break and then come back here. What time are we coming back here? At 2:50. And then we will start our conversation on the diagnostic odyssey. Thank you again, guys.